The human ship landed on the alien planet with a soft thud, its engines humming as it touched the surface. Jack, a young soldier, stood near the hatch, looking out over the barren landscape. The sky was a deep purple and strange. Jagged mountains stretched far into the distance. It was a world far different from Earth, but Jack was used to the unfamiliar. He had been on many missions before. "Prepare yourself, Jack," his commander, Captain Raymond, said as he handed him his helmet. "We're going to meet the Kraylands." Today, the Kraylands were known for their size and strength. They were a fierce species, feared by many across the galaxy. Their warriors were said to be taller than any human, and had a reputation for their unrelenting combat skills. It wasn't uncommon for their enemies to be intimidated before even stepping onto their planet. But Jack was different. "Don't worry, Captain. Ready for anything," Jack replied with a grin. The doors of the ship opened, and Jack stepped out with the rest of his team. They were here to negotiate a ceasefire between the Kraylands and a nearby species, the Zorthians. For years, the two species had been at war, and Earth was called in to mediate. But Jack didn't feel fear. Fear was a weakness, and he knew it. As they walked toward the Kraylan city, a group of large Kraylan warriors stood waiting for them. They were built like mountains, their blue skin glistening under the alien sun. Their eyes were a bright yellow, and their muscles seemed to ripple with every movement. Each one of them was a towering figure, easily twice the size of a human. The leader of the Kraylands, a warrior named Vokter, stepped forward. His face was marked with scars, each one telling a story of past battles. He looked down at the humans, his expression cold and serious. He was the biggest of them all, easily over 8 feet tall. He crossed his arms and looked at Jack with a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. "Who leads this mission?" Vokter's voice was deep and rough, like the sound of a boulder rolling across the ground. Jack stepped forward, his eyes meeting. Vokter's without hesitation. He didn't shrink back or show any sign of fear. "I do," he said firmly. Vokter studied Jack for a long moment. His eyes narrowed, trying to read the human before him. Most humans would be terrified to stand before a Kraylan warrior of his size and power, but not Jack. He just smiled. Vokter raised an eyebrow. "Why are you not afraid of me?" The other Kraylan warriors looked at Jack, waiting for an answer. Jack didn't flinch. He didn't even hesitate. "Why would I be afraid?" he asked, casually, as if the question was too simple to take seriously. "I've seen warriors like you before. You may be big and strong, but that doesn't scare me." There was a brief silence. Vokter's expression didn't change, but Jack could see the curiosity in his eyes. He had never met a human who wasn't afraid. Most humans he had encountered trembled in fear when facing a Kraylan warrior, but Jack didn't even seem to notice his size or the dangerous aura that surrounded him. "You think you are brave?" Vokter asked, his tone more thoughtful now. "Or are you simply foolish?" Jack shrugged, still smiling. "Maybe a bit of both. I've never been afraid of a fight." Vokter's yellow eyes scanned Jack from head to toe, sizing him up. "You are not what I expected," he said slowly. "Most humans would be trembling before me, but you, ... you are different." Jack's smile widened. "I've learned not to fear things I can't control, and as for you, well, you don't." "Seem all that scary?" The Kraylan warriors behind Vokter muttered among themselves, clearly surprised by Jack's boldness. Vokter remained silent for a moment, still looking at Jack as though he were a puzzle that needed to be solved. Finally, Vokter spoke again. "We will see if your bravery holds up when you face our tests." Jack nodded, unfazed. "I'm ready. Let's get to it." With a sharp nod, Vokter turned and gestured for Jack and his team to follow him. They entered the city, a place of towering structures made of dark stone and strange metals that Jack had never seen before. The streets were lined with alien technology, and the air was thick with the sounds of alien creatures moving about. The city was both beautiful and intimidating. But Jack's focus was clear. He wasn't here to admire the scenery. He was here to negotiate a ceasefire and prove that humans weren't just weak, scared creatures to be ignored. As they walked deeper into the city, Vokter led them to a massive arena. It was a place where Kralins tested their strength and endurance where battles were fought to prove one's worth. It was clear this was where the real tests would take place. "You will fight in the arena," Wachter said, his voice carrying an edge. "Prove that you are worthy of standing before us." Jack's eyes sparkled with determination. He wasn't afraid. He had faced challenges before, and this would be no different. As they prepared for the trials ahead, Jack couldn't help but smile again. The Kralins might be big and they might be powerful, but Jack knew one thing for sure: fear would not be the thing that stopped him. The massive arena stretched out before Jack, its high stone walls casting long shadows as the twin suns of the alien planet hung low in the sky. Looked like a place of ancient battles where warriors tested their strength and skills. The ground was hard and cracked, stained with the marks of countless fights. In the center of the arena, a large circle had been drawn, marking the place where the tests would take place. Jack stepped forward with his team, his boots echoing in the quiet space. Wachter, the Kralin leader, led them to the center of the arena. The other Kralin warriors stood in a circle around the arena, watching closely. The atmosphere was thick with tension. This was a test, not just of strength, but of courage and endurance. Jack knew this would be no easy task. "This is where you prove yourself," Wachter said, his voice carrying across the arena. "You will fight. You will survive. If you do, we will listen to your plea for peace." Jack nodded, his eyes focused. On Wachter, he didn't show fear or doubt. Instead, he stepped into the center of the circle without hesitation. The ground beneath him was rough and uneven, but that didn't matter. Jack had been in tougher situations before, and this would be no different. The Kralins around him started to chant, their voices deep and rumbling. It was a strange, powerful sound that sent shivers down Jack's spine, but he stood tall. Heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from the excitement of a challenge. This was what he had been trained for. Wachter stepped to the side and raised his arm. "The challenge begins now," he called out. From the shadows of the arena massive, creatures began to emerge, their bodies covered in scales and spines. They were like nothing Jack had ever seen before, alien beasts, each larger than a fully grown human. Some had sharp claws, others had long tails, and some had wings that flapped slowly, casting large shadows over the arena. These creatures were clearly meant to test Jack's strength and skill. It was a fight for survival, and Jack was the prey. As the creatures advanced, Jack took a deep breath, focusing his mind. He didn't have the physical power that these monsters possessed, but he had something else: his wit, his speed, and his ability to adapt to any situation. He wasn't afraid. He had faced danger before, and he wasn't going to back down now. The first creature lunged at him, its jaws snapping shut with a terrifying sound. Jack reacted quickly, sidestepping just in time. The creature's claws scraped the ground where he had been standing only a second before. Jack's heart raced, but his body remained calm. He knew what he had to do. He grabbed a large, jagged rock from the ground and hurled it toward the creature's eyes. The rock hit its target, and the creature let out a roar of pain, stumbling back. It wasn't enough to stop it, but it gave Jack a chance to get a better look at its movements. The creature was fast, but Jack was quicker. With the creature distracted, Jack moved in close, using his agility to stay out of its reach, ducked under its massive claws, and delivered a series of quick strikes to its legs. The creature howled in pain and stumbled to the ground, struggling to get back up.
Jack wasn't
going to let up. He continued to strike, aiming for weak points in its body. As the creature finally fell, Jack took a moment to catch his breath. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, not from fear, but from the intensity of the fight. His muscles were sore, but his mind was clear. I had won this battle, but there were more to come. The Kralins, watching from the circle, seemed to be growing more and more impressed with each passing moment. Jack had already taken down one of their fiercest beasts, something that few humans, or any species for that matter, could do. But there was no time to relax. Another creature was already charging toward him. This one was faster, its body sleek, and built for speed. Jack barely had time to react as it lunged at him, its claws slashing the air just inches from his face. He leaped to the side, rolling across the ground to avoid its next attack. The creature wasn't giving up. It was relentless, just like the others. And it was getting faster with every move. But Jack had something it didn't. Strategy. As the creature charged again, Jack used its momentum against it, sidestepped, and grabbed the creature's tail, using its own speed to throw it off balance. With a quick twist, Jack sent the creature crashing to the ground. He didn't wait for it to recover. He moved in quickly, using his strength to pin it down. The fight was fierce, but Jack didn't show any signs of exhaustion. His mind was clear and he was focused. The Kralins, who had once doubted him, were beginning to take notice. He was not just a soldier, he was a warrior, as the last creature fell. Jack stood in the center of the arena, breathing heavily, but still on his feet. His clothes were torn, and his skin was marked with bruises, but he was alive. He had survived. Stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The arena was silent, except for the sounds of Jack's breathing. The Kralins were still watching him, but their eyes were different now. There was no longer disdain or surprise in their gaze-only respect. Jack wiped the blood from his lip and looked up at Voctor, who was watching him with a curious expression. "Is that enough?" Jack asked, his voice steady. Voctor nodded slowly. "You have proven yourself human. You are not like the others. You fight with the spirit of a true warrior." The other Kralins murmured among themselves, and Jack could see the shift in their attitude. They no longer saw him as weak. They saw him as a threat, but one that had earned their respect. Jack smiled, wiping his hands on his pants. "I told you I'm not afraid." Voctor looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You will be a valuable ally, human. If you can fight like this, then perhaps we can reach an understanding." The Kralins gathered around Jack, their massive forms looming over him as the arena fell silent. The ground beneath them was still marked with the scars of the battle, but Jack stood tall in the center, breathing heavily, but with a fire in his eyes. He had passed the first test. The creatures had been no match for his quick thinking and sharp instincts. But now Jack knew there was more to prove. Voctor, the leader of the Kralons, watched him closely, his yellow eyes narrowed. The Kralon warriors around him whispered to each other, their deep voices a low hum that filled the space. It was clear that they were all still unsure about Jack. Most humans would have collapsed by now, overwhelmed by the size and power of the Kralin beasts. But Jack had shown no signs of weakness. He had fought with everything he had. Voctor stepped forward, his voice breaking the silence. "You have passed the first test, human, but now you will face a real challenge." Straightened, ready for whatever came next. "I'm not afraid of your challenges," he said, his voice steady and calm. Voctor nodded slowly, then turned to a group of Kralon warriors standing nearby. They stepped aside to reveal a massive stone structure. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. A giant boulder, almost 10 times the size of any human, was suspended in midair by ropes. Round it were several large machines, each one with a different function. "This," Voctor said, gesturing toward the stone, "is the ultimate test of strength. You will lift this stone using only your body. The Kralins who have passed this test are considered the strongest among us." Jack looked at the stone, then at Voctor, could feel the weight of the challenge ahead. The stone was massive, easily hundreds of tons. He could already hear the whispers of doubt from the other Kralins. He probably thought it was impossible for a human to even lift a fraction of it. But Jack didn't see it as impossible. He saw it as another challenge to overcome. "All right, let's get this over with," Jack said with a small grin. He walked up to the stone, placing his hands on its rough surface. The muscles in his arms tensed as he tested its weight. It was heavier than anything he had ever lifted, but he wasn't about to back down. Voctor watched him closely, arms crossed over his chest. The Kralins around the arena fell silent, their eyes fixed on Jack. It was a test of power, of sheer physical strength. But Jack knew that strength wasn't just about muscles, it was about willpower, about determination. He had seen people give up before when the odds were against them, but he wouldn't be one of those people. Taking a deep breath, Jack planted his feet firmly on the ground. He bent his knees, lowering his body, and then, with every ounce of strength he had, he pushed. The stone didn't budge. A murmur ran through. the crowd. Jack gritted his teeth and tried again. His body strained, his arms burning with the effort. But the stone remained unmoved. Voctor's gaze was intense. His yellow eyes locked on Jack. The Kralon leader said nothing, but his expression seemed to hold a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Jack could feel the pressure, but he didn't let it get to him. He wasn't going to fail. Not now. Jack stood up straight, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He took a few steps back and looked at the stone, studying it carefully. He knew it. It was heavy, he could feel the weight in his bones, but this wasn't just about strength. It was about using his mind, about finding the right approach. After a moment, Jack took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and focused. He pictured the stone in his mind, visualizing every inch of it. Then he stepped forward again, positioning himself differently. He placed his hands in a different spot, his feet planted firmly in the right place. This time, he didn't try to lift it all at once. Instead, he used his legs, his back, and his core to push in a way that would shift the stone's weight. He began to push. Slowly at first, then with more force, the stone trembled, then shifted ever so slightly. Heart raced as he continued to push, his body screaming with the effort. But this time, the stone moved. The Kralons watching gasped in disbelief as Jack finally lifted the stone, inch by inch, until it was above his waist. His muscles burned with the strain, but he kept going. High above his head, holding it there for a moment, his body trembling with the effort. The Kralons were silent for a moment, their eyes wide with shock. Jack stood there, holding the massive stone, his breath ragged, but his expression determined. He had done it. He had lifted the impossible. Voctor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You've passed the test," he said slowly. "No human has ever lifted the stone. But you, you did it. You have earned our respect." Jack lowered the stone back to the ground, his legs shaking from the effort. He was exhausted, but he had proven something to the Kralons. He had shown them that strength wasn't just about size, it was about determination, heart, and the will to push through when everything seemed impossible. The Kralon warriors, who had been silent up until that point, now erupted into cheers. They had witnessed something incredible. They had witnessed a human do what they thought was impossible. Jack stood tall, looking at Voctor with a smile. "Told you I wasn't afraid," he said, still breathing heavily. Voctor's eyes flickered with respect. "No, you are not afraid. That is what makes you dangerous human." The arena was quiet after Jack's incredible feat of strength. The Kralons stood in awe, their eyes wide with shock and respect. Jack, breathing heavily and still feeling the burn in his muscles from lifting the massive stone, took a few steps back, wiping the sweat from his brow. He wasn't finished yet. The trials weren't over, and he knew that Voctor, the Kralon leader, would want to test him in other ways. Voctor stepped forward, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over Jack. The Kralon's yellow eyes met Jack's, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of something other than suspicion in the leader's gaze. "It was respect. You have passed our tests of strength, human," Voctor said, his voice low, but with a note of admiration. "But there is more to being a warrior than strength alone." Jack nodded, his body still sore from the previous tests. "I know. What's next?" Voctor motioned for the group of Kralon warriors to step aside, revealing a long, winding path that led through a dense alien jungle. The trees were tall and twisted, their branches reaching toward the sky like outstretched arms. Strange creatures rustled in the underbrush, and the air was thick with the sounds of the unknown. "This is the path of the hunter," Voctor explained. "You will journey through this jungle, facing creatures and dangers that will test not just your strength, but your survival skills. Only those who pass the path are considered true Kralon warriors." Jack's eyes narrowed as he looked at the dense jungle. He had been in dangerous environments before, but this place was different. Kralons didn't play by the usual rules. Every step could be a danger. Every noise could be the sound of something deadly approaching. But Jack wasn't afraid. He had faced worse odds on Earth. He had faced war, and he had come out alive. This would be no different. "I'll make it through," Jack said confidently. Vokar studied him for a moment, as if weighing Jack's words carefully. Then he nodded and handed Jack a strange-looking weapon, elongated blade made of alien material, sharp enough to cut through the toughest of hides. "This will be your weapon," Voctor said. "It is an ancient Kralon blade, forged from the bones of the strongest creatures in our world. It will serve you well." Jack took the weapon, feeling its weight in his hands. The blade was unlike anything he had ever held, but it felt balanced, familiar in a way. He nodded in appreciation. Without another word, Voctor signaled for the start of the trial. The other Kralons stepped back, forming a ring around the jungle path. It was time for Jack to prove himself. He stepped into the jungle, his senses on high alert. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground was soft under his boots, making every step feel like a challenge. Strange, glowing plants lined the path, casting eerie light on the surroundings. As Jack moved deeper into the jungle, he could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the screeching calls of distant creatures. Every step he took felt like a warning. He gripped the alien blade tightly, ready for whatever might come. A sudden noise from behind him caught his attention. Without turning around, he swung the blade backward, striking the air. His instincts had told him that something was approaching. The creature that had been sneaking up on him let out a startled hiss as it retreated into the shadows. It was small, covered in scales, and had sharp claws. Jack hadn't killed it, but he had sent it running. He didn't have time to waste. He needed to keep moving. As he walked deeper into the jungle, the creatures grew more aggressive. At one point, a large beast, with glowing eyes and long taloned arms, leapt out from behind a tree, charging at him with incredible speed. Jack didn't hesitate. He dropped to a crouch, letting the creature rush past him. He sliced his blade across the beast's flank. The creature howled, but instead of retreating, it turned and lunged at him again. This time Jack was ready. He sidestepped, ducked under the creature's claws, and drove the blade deep into its chest. The beast let out one final roar before collapsing to the ground. Jack took a step back, his chest heaving with the effort. He had won this battle, but the jungle was far from finished with him. The further Jack went, the more the jungle seemed to change. The trees became thicker, the air heavier, and the creatures more dangerous. He could feel the weight of the task, growing heavier with each step. But he didn't stop. His training, his experience, his spirit, all of it pushed him forward. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to back down now. Hours passed, but Jack didn't lose his focus. He kept moving, defeating creatures along the way, never letting his guard down. His body ached, and the sweat dripped from his face, but he kept going. With each victory, he felt a deeper understanding of what Voctor had said. It wasn't just about strength. It was about surviving, about thinking quickly, about using everything you had to overcome the impossible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack emerged from the jungle. He was covered in dirt and blood, his clothes torn. But he was alive. He had made it through. Voctor was waiting for him at the edge of the jungle, his arms crossed over his chest. The Kralons were gathered around, their eyes wide with surprise and admiration. Jack stood tall, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his grip still tight on the Kralon blade. He had done it. He had survived the path of the hunter. Voctor stepped forward, his gaze steady. You have proven yourself human. You are not like any human I have encountered. You are a true warrior." Jack wiped the sweat from his brow and smiled. "I told you, I'm not afraid of your tests." Doctor nodded slowly, the hint of a smile on his face. "No, you are not. And that is why we respect you." Jack looked around at the Kralins, who were now nodding in agreement. For the first time since arriving on their planet, Jack felt the full weight of their respect. He had faced their trials, fought their creatures, and come out on top. The Kralins had seen him not as a weak human, but as a warrior, a force to be reckoned with. Jack stood at the edge of the jungle, the thick trees behind him hiding the dangers he had faced just hours before. His clothes were torn, his body ached, and there were several cuts and bruises scattered across his skin. Yet despite the pain, Jack stood tall, feeling the warm air of the alien planet against his face. He had made it through the path of the hunter. He had survived everything the Kralins threw at him. Voctor and the other Kralin warriors were silent as they watched him. The respect that had slowly started to grow among them now seemed undeniable. They had expected Jack to fail. Most humans would have given up long before reaching the jungle's heart. But Jack hadn't just survived. He had done it with strength, intelligence, and the unwavering will of a warrior. Voctor stepped forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow over Jack. His yellow eyes studied Jack closely, more than just observing the human he was measuring him. Jack had noticed the shift in the Kralin leader's demeanor ever since the first test. It wasn't just respect now. There was something else understanding. "You are different from the others," Voctor said, his voice softer than usual, but still as commanding as ever. "You are stronger than I believed." Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I told you I wasn't afraid." Voctor chuckled, the sound low and rumbling, almost like a growl. "Yes, you have proven that. You are no ordinary human."
Oh.
The other Kralins who had gathered around the arena and the jungle path now stepped forward. They were warriors, strong, fierce, and battle-tested. But as they looked at Jack, there was something new in their eyes. They no longer saw him as an outsider. They didn't just see him as a human, they saw him as one of them. "You have faced everything we could throw at you, human," one of the Kralin warriors, a massive creature named Orcs, said. His deep voice resonated in the air. "You did not run. You did not falter." Jack nodded, his eyes locking with Orcs. "I didn't have a choice. I came here to prove something, to show that humans aren't weak. We're survivors. We fight even when the odds are against us." Voctor's gaze softened. "And you have proven that. You have earned our respect, human." Jack looked around at the group of Kralins, who all nodded in agreement. He had done what no human had done before. He had fought in their trials, passed their tests, and earned something they didn't offer lightly: respect. The respect of the Kralins wasn't something you could just take. It had to be earned, and Jack had earned it. For a moment, everything was still. Jack could feel the weight of their gaze on him, but it wasn't one of judgment. It was one of understanding. He had done the impossible, and now the Kralins saw him as a true warrior. "We will honor your request," Voctor said, his voice steady. "We will speak to the Zorthians. We will work to end this war." "But you," Voctor said, his yellow eyes narrowing with something like pride, "you have shown us the strength of your people. You are not just a mediator, Jack. You are an ally." Jack couldn't help but smile. It had taken a lot to get to this point, but it had been worth it. He'd come to the Kralin planet to bring peace, to end the war. But he had also come to prove that humans weren't just a fragile species. They were strong, capable, and, when pushed to their limits, they could do anything. "You won't regret it," Jack said, his voice calm but full of confidence. "Humanity keeps its promises." Voctor gave him a deep, respectful bow, something that Jack realized was rare for the Kralins. The bow was not just a sign of respect for what Jack had done. It was a sign that the Kralins had come to see him as an equal. As a partner, the Kralins began to disperse, but Karok stayed behind. The giant warrior walked up to Jack, his eyes still full of curiosity. "You are unlike anyone I have met, human," Karok said, his voice thoughtful. "I have fought in wars across the galaxy. I have faced enemies far more powerful than the beasts you fought today. But you—" Karak paused, looking at Jack with new eyes. "You fight with your mind as well as your strength. That is something I have never seen in a human." Jack looked up at the towering Kralon, a small smile on his lips. "It's not just about strength, it's about survival. We learn, adapt, and fight. That's what makes us dangerous." Karak nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yes, dangerous indeed. Jack felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The hardest part of the mission had been the first test, turning the Kralon's respect. Now, he knew that he had done that. The war between the Kralons and the Zorthians was still ongoing. But for the first time, Jack felt like he had a real chance at bringing peace. The Kralons were no longer just allies. They were partners, and they were willing to help him. Voctor, noticing Jack's quiet satisfaction, stepped forward again. "You have done more than survive the path of the hunter, Jack. You have earned a place among us. The peace you seek may be closer than you think." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "Let's make sure it happens." As he looked around at the Kralon warriors, Jack felt a sense of pride. He'd come to their world as an outsider, a human, someone they thought weak. But he had proven them wrong. Now, the Kralons saw him, not just as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope, of strength, and of what humanity was capable of. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. But Jack was no stranger to challenges. He'd faced many in his life, and this was no different. With the respect of the Kralons behind him, Jack was ready to take the next step. The war was far from over. But now, Jack had the allies he needed to make a difference. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The days following Jack's successful trials passed quickly. The Kralons, who had once seen humanity as weak and insignificant, now treated Jack with respect as an equal. His actions in the arena and the jungle had earned him their trust. Now, Jack's mission was close to completion. The ceasefire between the Kralons and the Zorthians was on the verge of being finalized. But there was still one final test, to face something that could change everything. Vokatar. The Kralon leader had called Jack to meet him in the central hall of the Kralon stronghold. It was a large, dark room, lit only by the soft glow of alien crystals embedded in the walls. The air felt thick with anticipation. Jack could sense that something important was about to happen. As he entered the hall, Jack saw Voctor standing in the center, his arms crossed over his broad chest. The Kralon leader's expression was unreadable as always. But Jack could see the weight of the situation in his eyes. "You've proven yourself in every way." Human Voctor began, his deep voice echoing in the hall. "You've fought our beasts, survived our trials, and earned the respect of our people. But now, there is one final challenge." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What kind of challenge?" Voctor stepped aside, revealing a large holographic display. At the far end of the hall, it flickered to life, showing an image of the Zorthian Forces-An army of alien warriors, ships, and advanced weapons. The image showed a tense standoff between the Kralons and the Zorthians, two armies ready for battle. "This," Voctor said, pointing at the display, "is the final test. The Zorthians do not respect us. They think we are weak because of our peace talks with you. They have refused to honor the ceasefire and are planning to attack our homeworld. If you cannot convince them to stand down, there will be war. A war that will destroy everything we have built." Jack looked at the image of the Zorthians, his mind racing. He had known that the ceasefire wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't expected this. He had thought that, with the Kralon's strength and his help, the peace talks would be enough. But the Zorthians weren't convinced. They wanted to fight. "What do you want me to do?" Jack asked, his voice calm but determined. Voctor looked at him with a serious expression. "You will go to the Zorthian fleet. You'll speak to their leader, Commander Zorith. You will convince him to stop the attack. You must show him that peace is the only option." Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He had fought in battles before, but this was different. It wasn't about strength or survival. Anymore, it was about diplomacy, about using his words to avoid a war. It was a test of his ability to think, to negotiate, To use everything he had learned in his time with the Kraylins. You're asking me to do something no human has ever done before, Jack said, more to himself than to Vokter. Vokter nodded slowly. Yes, but you are no ordinary human. You have the strength, the will, and the wisdom to succeed where others have failed. Jack took a deep breath, looking at the image of the Zorthian fleet once more. This was it, the final test. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. He had proven himself in every other trial. Now he had to prove that humanity could be more than just a force of war. It could be a force for peace. I'll do it, Jack said, his voice steady and confident. I'll speak to Zorith. I'll make him listen. Vokter gave a small nod of approval. He will leave immediately. The Zorthian fleet is on the move. If you fail, there will be no turning back. Jack didn't hesitate. He turned and walked out of the hall, his mind already racing with plans. The Zorthians were known for their pride and stubbornness. They wouldn't just listen to anyone. But Jack had a feeling that if he approached this the right way, if he showed them the strength of humanity, they would hear him. Hours later, Jack found himself aboard a Kraylon warship, heading toward the Zorthian fleet. The ship's interior was cold and metallic, the walls lined with alien technology that Jack didn't fully understand. He stood at the window, looking out at the stars as they sped by. His heart was steady, but his mind was racing. This was the most important conversation of his life. Everything depended on it. As the warship neared the Zorthian fleet, Jack felt a sense of calm wash over him. He had faced challenges before, but this was different. This time he wasn't going into battle with weapons or strength. This time, his weapon would be his words. The ship finally docked with the Zorthian flagship, a massive vessel that towered over the Kraylin ship. Jack could see the Zorthian warriors standing at attention, their weapons at the ready. They were waiting for him. He stepped off the ship and onto the Zorthian vessel, his eyes scanning the dark corridors. The air was thick with tension. The Zorthian warriors watched him closely, their eyes full of suspicion. Jack didn't let it faze him. He had a job to do. At the end of the hallway, Commander Zorith stood waiting. He was tall, even by Zorthian standards, with sharp, angular features and glowing red eyes. His armor was adorned with symbols of war, and he carried himself like a soldier. He's not a diplomat. You are Jack, Zorith said, his voice deep and commanding. Jack nodded. I am, and I've come to talk. Zorith's eyes narrowed. Talk. I do not have time for words. The Kraylins are weak. They will fall. Jack stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. But war won't bring you what you want. It will destroy everything. The Kraylins are strong in their own way, but they've learned that peace is worth fighting for. You can't destroy a people's will to survive. Zorov seemed to consider Jack's words, but there was still resistance in his eyes. You're wasting your time, human. The Zorthians will never bow to the Kraylins. Jack took a deep breath, his mind working quickly. The Kraylins don't want you to bow. They want peace. We all want peace. But war won't solve anything. It will only make both our people weaker. There was a long silence. Zorith didn't speak, but his eyes never left Jack's. Jack could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. He had to make Zorith see the truth. I'm asking you to listen, Jack said. Not as enemies, but as warriors. Beings who have fought for what they believe in. We can still fight for what we believe in, but we don't have to destroy each other to do it. Zorith's gaze softened ever so slightly. Jack could see that he was listening, really listening. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jack had made him pause. Now he had to hold on to that moment.